i.e., i.e., what's really going on in Bitcoin cryptocurrency? Going to be taking a look at Litecoin against US dollar tether on the Binance chart. We're going to be taking a look at some of the technical aspects of price action moving forward. Going to be assessing what I believe are going to be some of the key kind of levels I'd suspect price action to be interacting with in the kind of near short term here. We do seem to be having I do seem to be noticing a pattern unfolding here in price action as we seem to be experiencing some exhaustion at this kind of swing high coming out of this most recent accumulation. Seem to be getting interacting with some key levels here after getting rejected off of this kind of $336 kind of level there. No, jumping right into it. To recap, this kind of price action that we've had kind of along this ascending trend line that I started back in the kind of end of October in 2020. So we have price action kind of rallying along this trend line. We broke under it for the first time back in 21st of March of this year. We rose back above it. Back in April of this year, so just earlier this month. We stayed above it for a few days just to come back under it, and we've been under it for the kind of last kind of couple days here. And so we are back below this trend line for the second time, suggesting a new kind of perhaps short-term bearish kind of perspective kind of thing. Perhaps some sideways to be suggested due to kind of this sort of pattern here. So not technical analysis, because it did it once, it's going to do it again. Can only get you so far, but this is just a suggestion that price action could take this sort of path moving forward. We have this kind of prolonged kind of sideways after this sort of aggressive kind of rally. We have seems to be like 22 kind of days of sideways after having 151% of upward gains in kind of 30 days there, followed by from that swing high to the kind of bottom of the kind of breakout, we have 22 days of sideways. From the breakout swing low, we have 98% in 24 days. Then following that kind of rally, we have this most recent kind of consolidation that we just kind of broke out of. To the bottom of that consolidation is 34 days of sideways. And so now this most recent kind of rally that we've seen from that swing low to this most recent swing high is 95% in 23 days. So this kind of, and we now seem to be experiencing kind of the first beginning of this kind of sell-off here, which is we're in like 5 days of this kind of sell-off. And so, a 22 to 30 day sell-off puts us sideways until kind of the middle of next month, or kind of roughly. And so this pattern seems to be kind of unfolding here, where we have these kind of 10 to 20 day rallies followed by perhaps 10 to even 30 days of sideways. And so we have had almost 100% in kind of gains in a 20-day kind of period, 23-day period there. So we have the kind of multi-10-day sort of rally, and then now we're experiencing a very aggressive kind of sell-off, very big kind of rejection. Very similar to these kind of three. We now have, we have this 30% kind of retracement over the course of a couple days from that swing high to a kind of like a relative local kind of swing low here. And so when we turn on EngineeringRobo along with the fettuccine lines, we have kind of a new perspective kind of come into play. And so we do see what I believe are going to be some kind of key levels I do believe price will be interacting with in the kind of near short term here. And so we have some kind of a pattern occurring in the kind of buy and sell suggestions here. So we have the kind of first buy for moon cloud buy coming in at the kind of beginning of November, end of October in 2020, and then at the kind of pullbacks prior to this to these kind of multi 10-day kind of sideways kind of periods, we have the kind of sell for supercell sort of combination. That which has a sideways, but supporting these kind of sell signals that are suggesting kind of some bearish accumulation. We have this moon and cloud buy still present at all kind of times so far. And we have the buy for returning, supporting the kind of breakout. We have supercell, sell for during sideways, super buy for the breakout, sell for or super sell, sell force, sell 2, sell 3, all these sell signals. First, like, what was the longest kind of sideways. And then we have the buy 4 supporting the breakout. And then we now seem to be interacting with another super sell, suggesting the kind of multi 10-day sideways here. Although we still have the cloud buy and moon and buy 4 still present. So we have more buy signals present during kind of this super sell being shown. Kind of similar to the sort of sell 2, sell 3, sell 4 kind of back in the consolidation at the end of November there. So we do have a chance to kind of break upward still, and the uptrend long term is kind of still it still seems to be bullish, and we can still see some kind of upward gains for Litecoin. But until then, some sideways is suggested. We could very well get rejected off of kind of 275 there, 269, come back down and trade above kind of 230 all the way perhaps down to like 219, 220. We seem to have price action down there, but I do seem to think this is kind of the key range. Perhaps we can kind of trade in before we kind of take off, kind of below sort of like 275 and above 220. I believe is going to be a key kind of range that we could be trapped in for a period of time before we kind of continue upward. If we were to get further rejected and start closing downward and start heading toward kind of 175 and sub 200, then we kind of would have to have a new perspective kind of come into play. Any new analysis would be kind of required. And so there's lots going on for Litecoin right now, technically and fundamentally. And so now when we consider the price of Litecoin against the relative price of Bitcoin, we see kind of a new kind of perspective at hand here. We seem to be interacting with some very significant resistance. Kind of at the bottom of this sort of range here, we seem to be experiencing some very significant buy pressure as prices are bouncing very aggressively off of these kind of key levels. We bottomed out, rounded off kind of at the end of March there, beginning of April. And we now seem to be coming out of a 67% kind of rally in sort of the past kind of couple weeks, and we now seem to be experiencing some exhaustion there. And so I do suspect perhaps if we were to get another rejection off of this kind of key range, if we were to print a lower high and we were unable to kind of wick perhaps past all that, we print the lower high there, we could very much kind of see some sideways kind of trading before we kind of take off again. And so this sideways, could last the tens of days, perhaps. But with the bullishness of cryptocurrency at the moment, we could very well see some very volatile gains at when we were least expecting it. When we slap on EngineeringRobo along with the Fibonacci lines, we can see a new perspective kind of come into play here. We have interaction with the buy 4 and sell 4 kind of along this range, but these flips are suggesting the bullishness still kind of at this level. There's lots of buy pressure. Interaction with the cloud along with the kind of gold and death cross kind of combination and signal there. And so finally, we do now seem to be coming out of this accumulation, finally back and forth between all these buy and sell signals, allowing Litecoin to remain kind of stable against kind of the price of Bitcoin. We do seem to have this buy 4, golden cross, and cloud buy signal coming into play as we are supporting our kind of breakout here as we start to close above this 200-day moving average against the price of Bitcoin, which is very, I believe, long-term bullish for Litecoin, and suggests we will be able to start seeing some continued gains against the price of Bitcoin. And so with these buy signals and these kind of more recent sort of fundamental kind of key aspects involved, we can very much see some kind of continued upward movement after some, perhaps a little bit of sideways and some continued kind of pullback. We have this 0.618 and 0.5 kind of level there correlating quite nicely, like these two Fibonacci lines of 0.618 and 0.5 correlating quite nicely with this kind of zone that I drew in a prior analysis. That was going to be our significant kind of final resistance before we can see some serious gains against the kind of price of Bitcoin there. And so now, when we consider the price of Bitcoin against the US dollar tether on the Binance chart, we can see kind of a new sort of perspective come into play here, and we can see there's a lot going on in the market at the moment. We're still coming out of the big sell-off, the big rejection off of the good old 60K there. So we have those huge sell signals coming into play still. There's like some very bearish consolidation occurring, and there's kind of there's a lot of indecision in the market. There's a lot of panic. There's a lot of worry, and there's a lot of traders panic selling. But there is a lot of still smart money in market buying it up, and waiting for panic sellers to sell at their tops and that kind of thing, and sell at the bottoms, and they're buying it up like it's nothing. Now, when we consider the fear and FOMO zone, we have the FOMO zone all the way up at 82K still. 82K. It's risen actually. 82.5. We're a good 52%, 53% away from the FOMO zone. I do believe, I suspect that we can recover quite nicely from this kind of pullback and this dip. In my opinion, the bullishness of Bitcoin is ever too abundant, and I do believe we can come out of this quite nicely. And I also suspect that a kind of more gradual accumulation and break upward like this will be far more healthy long term for Bitcoin, rather than just like a spike and blast upward kind of through all-time highs like we've been kind of before. Setting an all-time high is very long-term bullish for Bitcoin, but this rejection, this kind of short-term bearish sideways sort of rejection and bearish kind of reaccumulation is very long-term bullish for Bitcoin in my opinion. Although if we start getting rejected off of these kind of key levels here around the kind of higher sort of 50K ranges, like 57K there, if we do get rejected and we start closing about like below 51K and like into the high, like $50,000 kind of range there, and we start seeing the kind of like 49Ks, I believe if we start slipping, start slipping below kind of 47K, that'll be our worst case scenario, and we can see some kind of very sort of prolonged sideways at some levels that we've been seeing before we kind of see all-time highs again. Now, if we consider the price, like Litecoin's price against US dollar tether on the Binance chart, we can see down a new perspective here when we have the FOMO zone present. And so now the FOMO zone is where FOMO is present, tops are bought, prices are very volatile, although there's tons of sell pressure. So at the FOMO zone, we could see a very significant kind of rejection, or we could see a very significant kind of price spike and an aggressive kind of double or triple in value kind of thing. And so I suspect if prices can recover kind of exactly kind of where they are and bring us kind of above this ascending trend line again, and we can start kind of making some higher highs there above kind of 335. If we can't kind of start doing that really quickly, then I do believe we can start consolidating in a more kind of bearish manner. But if we were to able to recover like that, I do believe we can interact with the FOMO zone kind of in our kind of near future here over the next kind of few weeks to a couple months. I believe interaction with the FOMO zone is inevitable. Now, trading from the fear to FOMO zone will have you up. Say you got the very, very last kind of dip there of the fear zone. It's going to bring you up to the FOMO zone. You're going to make, I believe, over 600%, or at least over 550%. I can kind of guarantee if you trade all the way to the FOMO zone from the fear zone there. So if you were buying in at the beginning of November, end of October 2020, and you trade until perhaps end of May, end of June of 2021. That'll be your 500, 600% ROI in that period of time. Fear and FOMO zone is for more long-term investors. Support and resistance, I believe, would be for your more short-term investors and swing traders. Now, thank you for tuning in. Just look out for changes in momentum. Look out for EngineeringRobo's buy and sell signals. Try EngineeringRobo, free, link in the description. Check out all the social media down below. Subscribe here on YouTube, and tune in for the next one.